The Leper King, Baldwin IV. He ruled behind a silver mask, then shattered Saladin's invincible army.
On November 25, 1177, the arid plains of Montgisard, located just miles from Jerusalem, witnessed a scene that defied all military logic. A massive Muslim army, numbering anywhere from 20,000 to 26,000 men, under the command of the legendary Sultan Saladin, marched confidently toward the Holy City. Standing in their path was a vastly inferior Crusader force of scarcely 500 knights and 3,000 infantrymen. At the head of this desperate defense was not a seasoned veteran, but a 16-year-old boy, a king whose body was already rotting away from a terminal, incurable disease. Before the charge, the young king ordered the Bishop of Bethlehem to raise the relic of the true cross. He dismounted, prostrated himself in the sand, and prayed.
Rising to his feet, he gave the order to attack. That teenager was King Baldwin IV, and against impossible odds, he shattered Saladin's army that day. It was a victory won by a monarch who, by the laws of biology and the prejudices of his era, should never have been on a battlefield at all. Born in 1161 in the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem, Baldwin IV belonged to the prominent House of Anjou. He was an Outremer king, a European monarch born in the Levant, tasked with the supreme responsibility of ruling and defending the Latin East. His primary field of influence was military leadership and feudal politics during the tumultuous era of the Crusades.
Today, he is widely recognized as the Leper King of Jerusalem, a sovereign whose historical significance stems from his astonishing ability to preserve a precarious Christian kingdom against the unified Islamic forces of Saladin. Baldwin IV remains one of history's most striking examples of a ruler who overcame extreme, debilitating physical suffering to exercise supreme political and military authority. Baldwin was born into a world defined by religious fervor and constant warfare. His father was Amalric I, who would become King of Jerusalem, and his mother was Agnes of Courtenay.
The Crusader states in the 1160s were prosperous but geographically vulnerable, clinging to the eastern Mediterranean coast and surrounded by hostile Muslim emirates. When Baldwin was only 2 years old, his father was forced to annul his marriage to Agnes to ascend the throne, permanently separating the boy from his mother. Recognizing the young boy's sharp intellect, King Amalric appointed William of Tyre, one of the medieval era's greatest scholars and historians, to serve as Baldwin's tutor in 1170. It was William who made a chilling discovery. While observing 9-year-old Baldwin playing with other noble children, William noticed a disturbing detail.
The boys were playfully pinching each other's arms to see who could endure the pain. While the others cried out, Baldwin did not react. William examined the boy's right arm and realized it was completely numb. This was the first terrifying symptom of lepromatous leprosy, a devastating neurological and dermatological disease. In the 12th century, leprosy was an automatic death sentence. The grim diagnosis shaped every aspect of Baldwin's developing worldview. In medieval Christian theology, leprosy was frequently interpreted as a punishment from God, a physical manifestation of sin. Sufferers were routinely subjected to a mass of separation, stripped of their property, and banished to leper colonies to die in isolation. Yet, the Kingdom of Jerusalem made an unprecedented exception for their young prince. Rather than hiding him away, the royal court openly acknowledged his condition, but treated him as the rightful heir. This unique environment fostered a profound psychological resilience within Baldwin. Knowing his life would be tragically short and his body would slowly betray him, he developed an intense, almost fatalistic sense of duty. Furthermore, he was heavily influenced by shifting geopolitical sands. To the south in Egypt, a young general named Saladin was consolidating power, successfully unifying the Sunni Muslim states of Egypt and Syria by 1174. This encirclement impressed upon Baldwin the severe existential threat facing his realm. On July 11, 1174, King Almaric died of dysentery at the age of 38. Baldwin IV, only 13 years old, formally ascended to the throne of Jerusalem. Because he was a minor, the kingdom fell under the rule of regents. Initially, the realm was managed by the seneschal Miles of Plancy, but following his assassination, Raymond III, Count of Tripoli, took over the regency. During these early years, Baldwin's disease rapidly progressed. He began to lose the use of his hands and feet, yet he vehemently insisted on learning to ride a horse. Through sheer willpower, he learned to control his mount using only his knees, maintaining the martial image required of a medieval king.
In 1176, upon reaching his 15th birthday, Baldwin came of age and took the reins of power from Raymond III. His first act was a bold assertion of authority. He blatantly refused to ratify a peace treaty with Saladin, choosing instead to launch a daring raid into the territory around Damascus. It signaled to both his Muslim enemies and his ambitious Christian lords that the Leper King intended to rule in fact, not just in name. Baldwin's definitive breakthrough occurred on November 25, 1177, at the aforementioned Battle of Montgisard. Taking advantage of the Crusaders' internal political struggles, Saladin marched an immense army out of Egypt, bypassing Crusader strongholds and heading straight for an undefended Jerusalem.
Baldwin, accompanied by only 500 knights and perhaps 3,000 infantrymen, intercepted the massive invasion force near the hill of Montgisard. Saladin was so confident in his numerical superiority that he allowed his army to spread out and pillage the countryside. Baldwin, despite suffering from a fever and agonizing bodily sores, seized the moment. He led a devastating heavy cavalry charge directly into the center of Saladin's disorganized army. The element of surprise and the sheer ferocity of the Crusader assault threw the Muslim forces into absolute panic. Saladin himself narrowly escaped capture, fleeing the battlefield on a racing camel, while his elite Mamluk guard was annihilated.
Montgisard proved to the world that Baldwin IV possessed the tactical brilliance of a formidable commander, securing the kingdom's survival for another decade. Following Montgisard, Baldwin's reign became a constant, exhausting struggle against both Saladin's encroachments and his own deteriorating body.
1179, the Battle of Marj Ayoun. Baldwin suffered a severe military defeat against Saladin. During the frantic retreat, the king's horse was killed beneath him, and because of his paralyzed hands, he could not remount. A knight had to carry the king to safety on his back, highlighting the severe physical vulnerability of the monarch. 1180, truce with Saladin. Recognizing the kingdom's deep exhaustion and his own worsening health, Baldwin negotiated a pragmatic 2-year truce with Saladin, buying vital time for the Crusader state. 1183, the Siege of Karak. By this time, Baldwin was completely blind, covered in ulcers, and unable to walk. Saladin laid siege to the fortress of Karak during the wedding of Baldwin's half-sister Isabella. Demonstrating astonishing resolve, the blind and dying king ordered himself to be carried at the head of his army on a wooden litter. When Saladin heard that the Leper King was marching against him, he immediately lifted the siege and retreated, unwilling to risk a pitched battle. Baldwin IV is famous primarily for defying the medical, social, and political expectations of the 12th century. In an era where kings were expected to lead from the front with physical prowess, Baldwin successfully held together a fractious kingdom while suffering from a disease that literally caused his flesh to decay. He is remembered as the ultimate symbol of duty over suffering. In modern times, his fame expanded exponentially due to popular culture, most notably Ridley Scott's 2005 epic film Kingdom of Heaven, where actor Edward Norton masterfully portrayed the king. The film depicted Baldwin wearing a highly ornate silver mask to hide his disfigurement. While cinematically brilliant, historians note that there is no contemporary evidence that the real Baldwin IV ever wore a metal mask.
Instead, he likely obscured his face with simple cloth veils or appeared unmasked, enduring the stares of his subjects. Regardless, the dramatic image of the noble masked king cemented his status in global popular culture. Underneath his terrifying disease, Baldwin was an astoundingly lucid and politically astute individual. He was motivated by a profound belief in his divine right and sacred duty to protect the Holy Land. His former tutor, William of Tyre, described him as possessing an excellent memory, a deep love of history, and a highly generous spirit. His working style was defined by pragmatic urgency. Knowing he could never produce an heir, his entire domestic policy revolved around securing a viable succession through his sister Sibylla. His greatest strength was his unyielding willpower. He simply refused to abdicate when any other man would have retired to the quiet of a monastery. However, his severe physical limitations forced him to rely heavily on ambitious noblemen, which proved to be a critical political weakness. He could command standing armies, but he deeply struggled to control the bitter factionalism within his own royal court. Baldwin's reign was fraught with internal disaster and political blunders, preventing historians from viewing him as a flawless monarch.
His most significant failure was his ongoing inability to control rogue vassals, particularly Reynaud of Chatillon, who repeatedly violated truces with Saladin by attacking Muslim trade caravans. Baldwin's physical weakness made it practically impossible to enforce the law against such powerful warlords. Furthermore, the succession crisis was an unmitigated disaster. In 1180, to secure his sister Sibylla's position, Baldwin allowed her to marry Guy of Lusignan, a relatively unknown and politically inept knight. By 1183, as Baldwin's health failed completely, he appointed Guy as regent. Guy quickly proved disastrously incompetent, refusing to engage Saladin in a crucial standoff. Furious, Baldwin stripped Guy of the regency, attempted to annul his sister's marriage, and crowned his 5-year-old nephew, Baldwin V, as co-king. The royal court violently fractured into warring factions, a political catastrophe that Baldwin could not heal before his death. The immediate short-term impact of Baldwin IV was the undeniable preservation of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. For 11 highly volatile years, a dying boy successfully held off the greatest Muslim commander of the Middle Ages. He maintained the delicate balance of power in the Levant, preventing the unification of Islamic forces from completely overwhelming the Crusader states. The long-term effects of his reign, however, were undeniably tragic.
Because Baldwin could not leave a strong adult heir, his death plunged the kingdom into chaos. The deep factionalism he inadvertently fostered by empowering figures like Guy of Lusignan and Reynaud of Chatillon directly triggered the events of 1187. Just 2 years after Baldwin's death, Guy of Lusignan, now king, led the Crusader army to absolute annihilation at the Battle of Hattin, resulting in Saladin's swift capture of Jerusalem. Thus, Baldwin's legacy is dual. He was the shield that miraculously protected the kingdom, but his inability to secure a stable succession laid the groundwork for its ultimate destruction. Today, Baldwin IV's reputation has been thoroughly rehabilitated by modern historians.
For centuries, he was viewed merely as a tragic, sorrowful footnote, a symbol of the rotting, doomed Crusader enterprise. However, late 20th century scholars, particularly Bernard Hamilton in his definitive 2000 work, The Leper King and His Heirs, thoroughly re-evaluated Baldwin as an exceptionally capable and heroic monarch. His legacy endures in academic discourse regarding disability in the Middle Ages, proving that medieval society could, under specific circumstances, accommodate and elevate individuals with severe physical disabilities.
Beyond academia, he lives on in historical fiction, documentaries, and internet culture, where clips of his cinematic counterpart are frequently shared as symbols of stoic, unwavering leadership. He remains the most famous leper in history, remembered not for his disease, but for what he achieved in spite of it. King Baldwin IV died on May 16, 1185, at the age of 24.
his physical body completely ravaged by a disease that had stalked him since childhood. He was laid to rest in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. His brief life offers a profound meditation on the strict limits of human fragility and the boundless capacity of the human will.
Baldwin was dealt an exceptionally cruel hand, immense geopolitical power coupled with a terrifying, inescapable death sentence. Yet he absolutely refused to surrender to despair. He rode to war when he could not walk, he led armies when he could not see, and he carried the immense weight of an entire kingdom while his own flesh actively failed him. The Leper King of Jerusalem remains a timeless testament to the reality that true strength is not measured by the vitality of the physical body, but by the unbreakable fortitude of the human spirit.